Nobody's here? Good, I am.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we can begin, if people could find a seat, if you would like to take a chair, and I'm going to ask everybody, ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the singing of O Canada by Lance Sampson and MLA Susie Hansen, followed immediately by the Black International Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Mesdames et Messieurs, l'hymne national.
Thank you so much. And those two the lady before, Regis Wilkins and Lance Sampson, are as well Africville descendants, as well as myself. So here we are, pulling it together and doing what we do best, is representing the communities in which we come from. Oh, Canada, our home on native land, true patriot love in all our sons' command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, our true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our lands glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who has by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. our God where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Please be seated. Thank you very much, Susie, for that marvelous and very appropriate way to open our ceremony this morning. And I'm grateful today to be here today on Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We honor their valuable contributions and care for this land throughout the ages and to the present time. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome on this lovely and rather breezy June morning to the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada Plaque Unveiling ceremony honoring and commemorating George Dixon as a person of national historic significance. My name is Richard Alway, and I have the great honor and privilege to serve as chair of the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada, and I'll act as master of ceremonies for this morning's event. Chers invités, je me présente Richard Alway. J'ai le grand privilège et l'honneur de présider la Commission des lieux et monuments historiques du Canada, et je ferai office de maître de cérémonie pour cette occasion. I now have the pleasure of introducing our platform party, and I'm going to ask each of our guests to please rise and stand when his or her name is read, and to remain standing. And I'm going to ask all of you to withstand the natural impulse, to applaud and cheer each name individually, and to withhold your applause until the list is complete and we can give everyone together a joint enthusiastic North End welcome. So, first, representing the Government of Canada and the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and the Minister responsible for Parks Canada, Mr. Andy Fillmore, who is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, and Member of Parliament for Halifax. No, you keep standing, Andy. Ms. Nadine Spence, Vice President, Indigenous Affairs and Cultural Heritage, Parks Canada. Ms. Juanita Peters, Executive Director of the Africville Museum. Juanita. Mr. Craig Smith, our historian for today's event. And Mr. Russell Gross, HSMBC new representative for the province of Nova Scotia. Welcome, Russell. Ms. Miriam Linteau, Director, Cultural Heritage Programs at Park Canada. And last but by no means least, Ms. Nadine Williams, poet, author, educator, and as the nominator of this morning's designation, the person most responsible for us being here this morning, Nadine. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest. I'd also like to recognize this morning Dr. Mayanne Francis, the former Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, is with us. Welcome indeed, Your Honor. Thank you. Mesdames et Messieurs, le passé du Canada est riche en personnages et en événements de toutes sortes qui ont fait de notre pays ce qu'il est. En tant que Canadiens, la connaissance que nous avons de ce passé et de ses succès et de ses échecs vient enrichir notre compréhension du monde dans lequel nous vivons. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are doing this morning is, I think, very important to us as Canadians, to us as a people. Our own history and how we remember our past is important because it helps define the way we think of ourselves as a society. The straight fact is that history is to the nation as memory is to the individual. It gives meaning and context and identity. Without it, we simply cannot know ourselves. But if we use it as a common foundation, we can perhaps together begin to build a future bright with promise and possibility. So let me take just a moment to explain the work of the board to you. Created in 1919, the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada advises the Ministry of the Environment and the Government of Canada on the commemoration of nationally significant aspects of Canada's past. And as a board, our agenda is in large part driven by public concerns and interest as we respond to requests that people, places, or events be declared of national historic significance. And so for over a century, the installation of the familiar bronze plaques has been a cornerstone of the federal government's effort to formally commemorate those aspects of Canada's history that have been recognized as having pan-Canadian or national importance. And over this period, just around 2,000 plaques have been erected. This morning, we add to that number by recognizing George Dixon, one of the most talented and innovative boxers of the 19th century, the first black athlete and first Canadian to win a world title, and we recognize him this morning as a person of national historic significance. And through this ceremony, we seek to draw George Dixon and his achievements in boxing and in combating and overcoming discrimination and prejudice throughout his athletic career to the attention of all Canadians. And now it is my great pleasure to invite Ms. Juanita Peters, Director of the Africville Museum and our host this morning, to offer words of welcome. Juanita.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alway. I first want to say, if there's anybody here who thinks they're related to George Dixon, would you stand? Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One of the challenges has 8. One of the challenges has been, because George Dixon has been, thank you very much everybody, has been dead for so long. People say, we know we're related, but we don't know how. And I'm like, fix that family tree, somebody, please. Because these are very, very important things. First, I also want to acknowledge that we are located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And we acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. Welcome to Africville, everybody. And people want to think that we're just lucky that the day is like this, but I did a sun dance for 7 days straight. My legs are tired, and here we are. I'm so happy. Today's event is not just significant for people of Africville. Today is significant for all Canadians. You know, as we tell the history here at the Africville Museum of who Blacks of Nova Scotia are, that the most significant migration of Blacks was here in Nova Scotia, that we have the largest population and have always had the largest population of Indigenous Blacks right here in Nova Scotia. And the things that were created, the things that Blacks have done from Nova Scotia significantly that have impacted the world, those are the stories that we want to tell. And so this is a blessing today, a real thrill. And for me, it's so important to see all the descendants of Africville sitting here with us today, to be able to enjoy this and take that in. We travel, I travel a lot, and I'm in other countries and I see things and I say, there's a monument, but we got that. We don't celebrate as Canadians. We don't idolize our people the way that other, in Europe or in the US do. And we have to get better at that. We have to pat ourselves on the back. We have to give kudos to our own people who have done great things in the world. So before I leave, before you go here today, I hope that you take an opportunity to visit the museum. Please also walk the grounds and take in all the beauty that the grounds offers freely. We do free yoga here throughout the summer because these grounds offer so much in healing, and we offer people to come and take that in with us free of charge. So I will say thank you for coming, enjoy the day, and congratulations to all the people who have worked so hard to make today happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanita. And now it's my pleasure to call on Andy Fillmore, who, as I read before, and all these ministerial titles have many aspects to them. So Andy Fillmore, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, and Member of Parliament for Halifax, representing the Government of Canada, and the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, and the Minister responsible for Parks Canada, to present the national plaque. Andy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alway. And the last word is, it's just Andy. Andy, really nice to be here with you. I'm Andy. I do have the great privilege of being the Member of Parliament here in Halifax. What a tent and what a day. There are so many folks here that deserve recognition and acknowledgement. Your Honor, lovely to see you here. My Aunt Frances, lovely to see you. It's a who's who in the African Nova Scotian community. Past MLA Percy Paris, current MLAs Susie Hansen. I was just singing there, she is. Tony Ince is here. I'm going to forget somebody. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be a scandal. The legendary Craig Smith is here. Just fantastic. So we're all. But the important thing is that we're all here together, and what a day it is. The sun is shining on Africville today, and I don't know if you noticed, but a moment ago, a naval ship sailed by. It was an Arctic Offshore Patrol vessel. That one was Harry DeWolf, but it reminded me of HMCS William Hall, recently named for a great African Nova Scotian. Here. So thank you for the land acknowledgement. We're on Mi'kma'ki, where we're all treaty people. I also want to recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose legacies and histories and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. And that's where we are today. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'être ici à Africville avec tous au nom de l'honorable Steve Guilbeault, ministre responsable de Parks Canada. So today we're here to officially unveil the plaque recognizing George Dixon as a person of national historic significance, and he's watching from his mural just down the way on the other side of the parking lot. Such a great location. Standing here at the Africville Museum, marking the place where George Dixon was born and raised, is a very special moment for all of us. I think we're all gonna learn maybe a little bit more than we already knew about George Dixon today, but I'll add a few things. George was an absolutely remarkable individual whose impact on history continues to inspire us today and inspire youth today. He's a legendary figure in the world of sports and a beacon of what it means to be resilient and to stand up in the face of unthinkable hardship, and excelling beyond that, leaving this indelible mark on the history of sport and on our Canadian society. Before there was a Joe Louis, before there was Muhammad Ali, there was George Dixon, widely regarded as one of the top fighters of the late 19th century. He not only shattered racial barriers, but also provided the world that showed the world that talent and determination know no bounds. He faced discrimination, he faced segregation, adversity, all of these things throughout his life and throughout his professional career. However, he never let those obstacles define him or limit his goals or his dreams or his potential, and he became the first black world champion boxer of the world. His first official fight was in 1886 right here in Halifax, where he knocked out Young Johnson. For the next 4 years, he fought exclusively in Boston, making a name for himself to American audiences. In 1890, he took his skills to the international stage when he traveled to England, where he knocked out Nunk Wallace. That was 18 rounds. It took him 18 rounds to do it, but by God, he did it. Imagine that. That's just unheard of in boxing today. He resigned the bantamweight championship after defending it only once so that he could move up a weight class And in the early 1890s, he captured the world featherweight title, in the process becoming the first boxer to hold world titles in 2 different weight categories. He would have 3 separate reigns as featherweight champion, making him the first fighter to lose and then regain a title. George Dixon was also known for his training style. He developed many innovative techniques that included using hand weights, it included using a speed bag attached to the floor, a new style of footwork that he employed hitting the heavy bag. But arguably his most important innovation was shadow boxing. No one had done that before. This technique involves punching, dodging an imaginary opponent that builds muscle and it builds skill when you're training alone. And this went on to be used widely by future generations. It was a significant innovation for boxers around the world. But George Dixon's athletic triumph was not just a personal victory, but a win for equality and social justice as well. In an era marked by prejudice, his ascent to greatness challenged norms and paved the way for people of color and athletes of color for generations to come. He proved that excellence in any field is not bound by the color of one's skin. What makes Dixon's story even more remarkable is the way that he carried himself outside of the ring. He exemplified grace and humility by using his platform to expand the rights of others. He worked with his promoters to reserve tickets for people of color to watch his matches, something unheard of at the time. His impact on history resonates in the ongoing struggle for racial equality in the fight against discrimination today. Dixon's courage and determination serve as a reminder that progress is possible when individuals use their influence to stand up against injustice and work towards a more inclusive society. And today we remember George Dixon. We celebrate both his athletic accomplishments and the enduring lessons that he left behind. His story showcases the importance of perseverance, compassion, and breaking down racial barriers. It reminds us that greatness lies within reach of each of us, to be unleashed regardless of our background and circumstance. As we strive for a better world, we draw inspiration from the trailblazers of our shared history, like George Dixon, and we must commit ourselves to create a society that values and celebrates diversity. His legacy reminds us that our progress as a nation is intrinsically tied to our ability to uplift every individual within our midst. I also want to take this opportunity to shed some light on a mural that was commissioned in 2020. I don't think anybody here needs to hear about it, is not hearing about it for the first time. The artist was Michael Burt, and 2 other artists from Trackside Studio, who are well known for their murals and advocacy in other parts of our community, were involved in this mural. It was another way to honor Dixon and to bring awareness to the history, culture, and resilience of the Africville community. So let's honor the memory of George Dixon by carrying forward his spirit of resilience and sportsmanship. Let us continue to work towards a future where every individual, regardless of background, can pursue their dreams and contribute their talents for the betterment of society. It's important to continue building a Canada that is as welcoming as it is diverse. This is Canada, and here we all belong. Je tiens à remercier les membres de la Commission des lieux et monuments historiques du Canada pour le travail qui accomplissent avec tant générosité, travail qui a conduit à cette désignation. And thanks also to you, Nadine, for your work in inviting us to your party today. I'd like to thank members of the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada for their hard work and Nadine's hard work that led to this day. We're creating a rich mosaic portraying a pivotal moment in our nation's history, and future generations will better understand their history through this mosaic that now includes George Dixon, and hopefully better understand themselves and the values of Canada itself. Merci beaucoup. Voilà.
Thanks, Andy. Well done. Very good. This morning, representing Ron Holman, President and CEO of Parks Canada, we're privileged to have the Vice President for Indigenous Affairs and Cultural Heritage, my close colleague and fellow member of the board, Ms. Nadine Spence. So Nadine, if you come forward to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holloway. Merci et bienvenue et bonjour toutes et tous. Il me fait plaisir d'être ici et vous porter les salutations de l'équipe de Parcs Canada. First, let me say that on a professional level, In my role as Vice President of Indigenous Affairs and Cultural Heritage, it is particularly gratifying to be here on behalf of the Parks Canada team, of whom I'm very proud. Let's turn now to the reason we are all here today. The central responsibility of Parks Canada is to protect, share, and provide opportunities for Canadians to learn about our amazing and diverse natural and cultural heritage. Through the National Program of Historical Commemoration, we work with partners across the country to share Canadian history, including the more difficult moments of our collective past. National historic sites like Africville and national historic designations, such as the one for George Dixon, tell the authentic stories of this country's past. Sorry, just give it a moment. Au cours des derniers siècles et proposant en grande partie ceux des propositions du public, plus de 2200 désignations ont été effectuées à l'échelle nationale. Elle démontre l'importance qu'accorde la population canadienne à la reconnaissance historique nationale de personnages, de lieux et d'événements qui ont marqué l'histoire du Canada. National historic designations illustrate many defining moments and the diverse and complex stories that have shaped this country. We aim to foster understanding and reflection of the diverse cultures, legacies, and realities of Canada's past and present. It is an absolute honor to commemorate the national historic significance of George Dixon, an African Nova Scotian who overcame racial prejudice and discrimination. To become the first fighter to win world titles at multiple weight classes and the first to have multiple reigns with a world title. Finally, I would like to acknowledge all those who have collaborated to make this important event possible, including the community, all of our special guests, the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada, and of course the hard-working members of our very own Parks Canada team. D'un bout à l'autre du pays, les membres de l'équipe de Parcs Canada sont extrêmement fiers de protéger et de mettre en valeur les lieux historiques nationaux, les parcs nationaux et les aires nationales de conservation. I invite everyone to learn more about George Dixon and his defining role in Canadian history, taking the time to discover the incredible depth of our shared cultural heritage through National Historic Sites and designations helps us all to better understand ourselves, each other, and this country. With that, back to you, Dr. Holloway. Merci et chu placo.
Thanks very much, Nadine. Nadine just flew in, I think yesterday, from Victoria to be with us. So we're fortunate today to have someone with us who can help us place what we're doing in its historical context more broadly. Someone who knows a great deal about George Dixon at this point, his career, his place in our national story, really. And I'm now going to invite Mr. Craig Smith to the podium to enlighten the rest of us. Craig, please.
Thank you, Dr. Owen. Good morning.
Good morning.
Special guests, dignitaries, politicians, athletes, friends and family. I want to say how pleased I was to ask to come and speak a little bit about George Dixon, but it wasn't just from the perspective of George Dixon, but George Dixon from the perspective of where he comes from and what molded him and what made him who he was. So Nova Scotia has no shortage of outstanding athletes. If I say the names Sidney Crosby or Ellie Black, Colleen Jones or Johnny Miles, very recognizable names. When it comes to the African Nova Scotian community, there is no shortage of equally and comparably outstanding athletes as well. But not everybody can recall their names as quickly. Art Dorrington, Chuck Maxwell, the great Irvin Lucas, Marjorie Turner Bailey, Julie Barton. In more recent times, Ray Downey, Brian Gibson, Kirk Johnson, who's here with us today, Wayne Smith, Ted Upshaw, and even today making their mark, the Ira Smith in the world of swimming, and Lindell Wigington in basketball. And I could go on. But the story of African Nova Scotian athlete George Dixon, who had to train and work hard at his sport while facing the bigotry, the Jim Crow discriminatory practices, and the overt racism of the day, make his accomplishments all the more astonishing. Imagine, if you will, at a time when a black person could lose their life for simply entering an establishment through the front door instead of the back door that was usually relegated for us, or for drinking and quenching their thirst from a white drinking fountain as opposed to the colored drinking fountain. George Dixon became the most famous black person in the world in the face of that adversity. When I think of the name George Dixon, it conjures up for me the center that's named after him in the center of Halifax, where I grew up, where my wife started her work career, where thousands of children have entered over the years and called it home. During my North Branch Library days, I was informed by somebody in our reference department that they had a photocopied copy of A Lesson in Boxing, the book that was created and produced by George Dixon. I couldn't get down to Spring Garden Road fast enough to gaze my eyes on it, I can't lie. Published in 1893, the first African Canadian from Atlantic Canada to do so. His contribution to the sport was huge, and it wasn't just as an athlete. His earlier training as a photographer made the book all the more useful, because he ensured that the reader actually got to see how to throw a punch, how to counter punch, what the techniques were, and what you did. Like those that would follow him, George Dixon was a true innovator of the sport. When you think of the Colored Hockey League, or the NBA, Major League Baseball, golf, or tennis, we can point to the innovative play that people of African descent have brought to those respective sports. If I say the name Henry Franklin from the Colored Hockey League, first goaltender to go down, block shots. If I talk about NBA legends, Bill Russell and Dr. J, speaks for themselves. The great Satchel Paige or Jackie Robinson in baseball. And of course Tiger, and then Venus and Serena. Like fellow African Canadian innovator Elijah McCoy, for whom we all own the phrase "the real McCoy," George Dixon was the first of those innovators. And the things that he would bring to the sport of boxing have become the training regimen for most boxers around the world, as Mr. Fillmore attested to a few moments ago. The sport of boxing owes an enormous debt to this Africville native, whose name should always be spoken when we speak of Canadian legends and Canadian icons. I want to take a different approach for a quick minute, though, and talk about his life by comparing it to his home community. Both George Dixon and the community of Africville tackled discrimination head-on. He, by taking on white boxers at a time when it wasn't something that was readily done, and as a matter of fact was outlawed in a lot of the states in the U.S. When it comes to the community of Africville, they would not allow their community to become a footnote in Canadian history. And it too had more than its share of obstacles to overcome, petitioning the city of Halifax for the services provided to white Haligonians. Fighting a much larger foe in governmental bureaucracy and red tape that outweighed them layered in lawyers and politicians who only viewed the land that we're standing on now as worth taking at the residents' expense. This community and its residents waged a formidable battle for years to keep their homes and the land that they held deeds to. They weren't squatters by any means. And like George Dixon, they were fighting outside of their weight class as well, in remaining defiant to bring a resolve to their home community. They too became innovators in how to keep the memory of their lost community alive. Weekly Saturday meetings at the North Branch Library, the creation of the Africville Genealogy Society, and then 40 years ago this year, the first Africville reunion. Innovation in the face of adversity. Did they know that 40 years later, it would have grown into the much loved and attended annual event that it has become? That they would have 40 years of celebrating on the land that was once theirs. And they would have such visitors as Martin Luther King Jr. III, or more recently, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And like the boxer, who has had plays, poems, and books written about him, so has Africville, including Shine Boy and Consecrated Ground, both written by the late Halifax playwright George Boyd. First black to have his play performed at center stage at Neptune Theatre, and Shine Boy was the first black play to be performed at Neptune Theatre. Consecrated Ground, which was written about the community of Africville, would garner him a Governor General Award nomination. And there have at least been a dozen books written about both as well. Simply put, George Dixon has never been far away from the hearts and minds of his African Nova Scotian roots. And the history of him and the history of Africville are forever intertwined pieces of Canadian history. Dixon's last fight was in 1906. He died in Bellevue Hospital in New York City on January the 6th, 1908. His body is interred at Boston Mount Hope Cemetery. And not long after his death, there was actually a public fountain erected in New York City to honor him. He was so loved. And we have still been trying to track down that fountain so we can bring it back home here to Africville. Much like the community of Africville, that has continued to remain relevant and a symbol of resilience and pride for its people, George Dixon memory has done the same. Everybody knows Ali, Fraser, Hagler, Hearns, Lewis, and Tyson. But the one who blazed the trail for all of them to follow was none other than a little guy in stature who only stood about 5'4", but was a giant among men in ability, intellect, and legacy. And he was Africville's own George Dixon. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, for those marvelous and inspiring words. It's very, very appropriate indeed. Now, I think next in our program here, just the breeze blows the pages, as you've been noticing. So, here we are. After Craig, I'm now going to ask my new colleague on the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada to say a few words, representing the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Russell Gross. Russell, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. So honored and blessed to be here. Bonjour, hello, Kwe, MP Fillmore, Dr. Francis, Mr. Paris, distinguished guests, community and family and friends. I'm honored and humbled to join you here today for this very special commemoration of historical significance. I was privileged earlier this year to accept the appointment as Nova Scotia's representative on the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada. Today marks my first official ceremony, and it couldn't be a better day for that. As a proud African Nova Scotian, the commemoration on the shores of one of Nova Scotia's once thriving historic black communities is truly meaningful. Although we face the sad reality that the historical community of Africville no longer exists, we have hope as the legacy lives on in events like today. It is never too late to reflect, remember, and commemorate. The remarkable story of George Dixon is like the long-standing history of people of African descent here in Nova Scotia that spans back well over 400 years in our province. A legacy of overcoming great obstacles to survive and contribute to the fabric of our country, Canada. To simply put it, individuals such as George Dixon, who are being commemorated, and the commemoration today, and those past African Nova Scotians who were commemorated, such as Viola Desmond, William Hall, Portia White, Richard Preston, Rose Fortune, and No. 2 Construction Battalion, to name a few, are all constant examples that demonstrate the spirit of perseverance in the African Nova Scotia community. It is vital that we commemorate our history and share our stories of the past for future generations. A quote from noted African-American leader and poet Maya Angelou states, "If you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going." This powerful quote echoes the importance of our shared diverse history and the important role of the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada. Since its inception, the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada, also known as HSMBC, has played a role in the remembrance of our history through commemorations of important people, places, and events that ensure that our past isn't lost. The HSMBC is made up of individuals from across Canada that are passionate about the remembrance and preservation of our diverse shared history. Today, I welcome the board members from across Canada who are here joining us and are on the grounds of this very sacred and historic place of Africville. I invite you as community members today to sit back, think, reflect our special heritage and culture that we have and our long-standing history in this province, and consider submitting nominations to the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada so that history is not lost and always commemorated. Thank you. Merci. Voilà.
Thank you very much, Russell. And Russell read through a little list there of commemorations that are particularly relevant to the Black community in Nova Scotia. And it's not a short list. It's actually pretty good. But we can always stand to receive more expressions of interest, more ideas. The program is very open. All it takes is a 1 or 2 or 3 line letter. You don't have to do all the research. You just come forward with the idea, and the professional historians in Ottawa will take it from there and do their work. It's not that every idea will come forward and bear fruit in the way that George Dixon's nomination did from Nadine, but this is what we need, this is what the program needs, and this is what keeps the program vital and alive as we go forward. We have 2,000 designations that are plaqued at the moment, and we need more going forward, and it will only happen if it comes from you. So, having said that, we're now going to, I believe, come to the moment of unveiling the plaque, but before we do that, I'm going to ask Nadine Williams if she'd like to read one of her poems, and then, because the plaque is already installed here in its permanent future location, we're going to do things a little bit differently in terms of order. So I'm going to ask Nadine if she'd come forward now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alway. Good morning, everyone. It's my distinct honor and blessing to stand before you here this morning, and I'm going to be sharing a poem called The Fabric of Our Being, my 2017 Black History Month poster that led me on the trajectory of nominating historical significant events and person, of which I have 3. I'm very proud, and this is my first time in Nova Scotia, and I'm just so blessed to be here with you guys. Tightly woven into Canada's fabric, generation strong. Yes, we've been here all along. Certainly not of our own free will, but in search of freedom song. Not newcomers on the fringes as some would have us believe. Look closer to the center, if you please. You will see us living the Canadian dream, once a nightmare to our ancestral stream. Crossing many rivers, valleys, and streams. We've come a mighty long way. Though it's been a hard road to travel, we will not unravel, but will revel in the beauty and multicultural fabric of our home and native land. Generation strong. You best believe we've been here all along. The fabric of our being. Thank you.
What a marvelous way to wind up this ceremony. Thank you very much, Nadine. Excellent. Great contribution to our ceremony. Well, now I'm going to ask Russell Gross, our new member from Nova Scotia, and Miriam Lanto to please come forward, and they're going to read the translation and of the text in both our official languages. And this is necessary because until you get over there to the plaque, you won't know what it says. You're far too far away. It's actually facing the other way. I always say, you know, we don't bring opera glasses to events like this, so we need the plaque text reader. So if you'd come forward, please.
Glad to be here again, up at the podium again to share this historic moment. Today we are gathered to commemorate the legacy of trailblazer George Dixon, and I will proceed in sharing the official plaque text on behalf of the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada on this 12th day of June 2023 here on the historic grounds of Africville. George Dixon, 1870 to 1908. The first black boxer and Canadian to win the world title and regarded as one of the top fighters in the late 19th century. Dixon was renowned for his stamina, speed, and defense. Born in Africville and based in Boston, he won the bantamweight title in 1890 before moving up a weight class, winning the featherweight title in 1891. His innovative training techniques, including shadow boxing, were widely adopted during the era and are still in use today. He confronted racial prejudice throughout his life and used his popularity to create opportunities for black boxers and fans and contributed to organizations that fought discrimination.
Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Donc, le texte en français se lit comme suit. George Dixon, 1870-1908. Premier boxeur noir et premier Canadien à remporter un titre mondial, Dixon, réputé pour son endurance, sa vitesse et ses techniques de défense, est reconnu comme l'un des meilleurs pugilistes de la fin du 19e siècle. Né à Africville et établi à Boston, il gagne le titre mondial de poids coq en 1890, puis celui de poids plume en 1891. Ces techniques d'entraînement novatrices, dont le combat simulé, se propagent à l'époque et perdurent jusqu'à ce jour. Il fait face aux préjugés raciaux sa vie durant, use de sa popularité pour aider les boxeurs et admirateurs de boxe noire et contribue à des organismes luttant contre la discrimination.
Thank you very much. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to, in just a moment, invite you all over to the plaque, and the official party will unveil the plaque, but you can all stand there, and the photographers will take over the show. It'll be very much like a wedding, and we all have to obey the photographers on these occasions. But ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the formal part of our ceremony, and I want to thank you all for being here. And please just join us at the plaque, and then afterwards at the reception and small luncheon that will be served in the museum around at the back, I believe, downstairs. And there are washrooms available on the main floor and in the basement as well, just important pieces of knowledge that I want to share at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here, and come to the plaque. En terminant, je désire une invitation à tous nos invités. Venez vous joindre à nous pour une réception. Et je vous remercie d'être venus aujourd'hui. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you again for coming. Merci et bonjour. Let's continue the celebration.